There is a moment in almost every human life that arrives without warning. It does not announce itself with thunder. It does not come with dramatic music or a final goodbye worthy of a storybook. More often it begins with silence, a message that never receives a reply, a conversation that slowly becomes shorter, eyes that no longer hold the same warmth, a voice that once sought you every day, now finding reasons to stay away. It is in these quiet moments that the heart begins to understand something the mind desperately refuses to accept. Someone is leaving, not always physically, sometimes emotionally, sometimes spiritually, sometimes little by little, one ordinary day at a time. If you have ever experienced this, then you already know that the deepest pain rarely arrives all at once. It arrives in fragments. You notice a small change, and you tell yourself not to overthink it. Then another change follows, then another. You begin searching for explanations because the human mind has always feared uncertainty more than painful certainty. You convince yourself that perhaps they are simply tired. Perhaps life has become difficult for them. Perhaps tomorrow everything will return to normal. But tomorrow arrives, and nothing changes. So you try harder. You become kinder, more attentive, more available. You begin giving pieces of yourself that no one asked you to give. Not because you are weak, because you are afraid that if you stop trying, the distance will become permanent. This fear has followed humanity since long before anyone spoke of Stoicism. It has existed in every civilization, every culture, every generation. Different languages have given it different names, but the experience has always been the same. We fear losing what has become meaningful to us. We fear waking up one morning and discovering that someone who once occupied a central place in our lives has quietly become a stranger. And because we fear that possibility, we begin to fight against reality itself. We believe that if we explain ourselves one more time, they may understand. If we apologize once more, perhaps they will stay. If we become more interesting, more successful, more attractive, more patient, more available, somehow we can persuade another human heart to remain where it has already decided to leave. This is one of the greatest illusions the Stoics sought to free us from, not because they believed love was unimportant. Quite the opposite. They believed love was too beautiful to be corrupted by possession. Before we continue, I would like to ask you something. As you listen to these reflections, do not simply think about another person. Think about yourself. Think about your own experiences. And if, at any point during this journey, you feel that these ideas speak directly to your life, consider subscribing to this channel. Here, we are building a community of people who seek wisdom instead of noise, clarity instead of confusion, and inner strength instead of temporary comfort. If someone comes to your mind while listening, share this reflection with them. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer another person is not advice, but perspective. Now let us continue. The ancient Stoics understood something that many people spend an entire lifetime discovering. The greatest suffering does not begin when someone leaves. It begins when we believe our peace depends on preventing them from leaving. This distinction changes everything. Think carefully about the difference. Losing someone is painful. Trying to control what you cannot. Control is exhausting. The pain belongs to life. The exhaustion belongs to resistance. Imagine standing on the shore of the ocean while the tide slowly begins to retreat. You walk toward the water because you want it to remain exactly where it is. As each wave pulls back, you take another step, then another, then another. Before long, you are running after the sea itself, no matter how determined you are, no matter how sincere your intentions. No, Matter how deeply you love the ocean, it continues moving according to its own nature. Would anyone call you foolish for loving the sea? Of course not. But they might gently ask why you believe the sea should stop moving simply because you wish it to. This is how many relationships unfold. The problem is not that we loved. The problem is that we expected love to suspend the laws of human nature. We expected people never to change, never to struggle, never to outgrow us, never to choose another path, never to leave. But life has never made such promises. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his life surrounded by uncertainty. Although history remembers him as a Roman emperor, he never wrote as a man intoxicated by power. When you read his private reflections, you do not encounter someone obsessed with controlling the world. You encounter a man constantly reminding himself that the world was never his to control in the first place. He wrote those reflections not for an audience, but for himself. He understood that the greatest battle would always be internal. How easily we forget this. We spend years trying to master careers, relationships, finances, influence, and reputation, yet very few people dedicate equal effort to mastering their own minds. The Stoics believed this was backwards, because if your own mind remains undisciplined, then success itself becomes fragile. You may gain admiration and still fear rejection. You may find love and still fear abandonment. You may achieve wealth and still fear losing everything. External success cannot compensate for internal instability. This is why Stoicism begins from within, not because the outside world is unimportant, but because your experience of the outside world will always be filtered through your own thoughts. Now imagine a student approaching an old Stoic teacher. The student says, "Master, the woman I love no longer wishes to remain with me. Tell me what I should do." The teacher remains silent for a moment. He does not answer immediately. He understands that wisdom often enters more easily after silence than after hurried words. Finally, he asks a question. "Tell me, do you wish for her happiness?" The student quickly answers, "Of course." The teacher nods. "And if her happiness no longer includes walking beside you, would you still wish for it?" The student says nothing, because now he understands that he has confused two very different things, love and possession. The Stoics often reminded their students that love seeks the good of another person. Possession seeks the satisfaction of oneself. At first, the difference seems almost invisible, but eventually life forces us to see it. When someone chooses a different path, possession says, "Stay because I need you." Love quietly whispers,
"If leaving is what your soul truly requires,
"I will not destroy myself, trying to imprison your freedom." This is not weakness. This is one of the highest forms of courage, because nothing challenges the human ego more than accepting that another person's choices exist beyond our authority. Epictetus repeatedly taught that some things belong to us, while others never will. Most people hear this teaching and immediately think about money, careers, or politics. But perhaps nowhere is it more important than in relationships. Another person's affection never belonged to you. Another person's loyalty could never be owned. Another person's future has always remained theirs. The only thing that truly belonged to you was the kind of person you chose to become while loving them. This is why two people can experience the same heartbreak and emerge completely different. One becomes bitter. The other becomes wiser. One loses trust in humanity. The other develops deeper compassion. One allows rejection to define their identity. The other allows adversity to refine their character. The event is identical. The interpretation creates two different lives. And here we arrive at one of the most liberating ideas in all of Stoicism. You cannot always choose what happens to you, but you can always participate in deciding what it means. That choice remains yours, even when everything else appears to have been taken away. And perhaps that is where true freedom quietly begins. If there is one mistake that nearly every human being makes after losing someone they deeply care about, it is believing that the solution lies somewhere outside themselves. They begin searching for the perfect conversation, the perfect explanation, the perfect message, the perfect gesture that might somehow reverse what has already begun to unfold. It is a completely understandable impulse. The human heart has always wanted to repair what it fears losing. There is nothing shameful about that. The Stoics would never condemn you for loving deeply. They would never ask you to become indifferent to human connection. They would never suggest that the ideal person is someone who feels nothing. That is perhaps one of the greatest misunderstandings about Stoicism. People often imagine the Stoic as someone cold, detached, incapable of affection, someone who walks through life untouched by joy or sorrow. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics loved. They formed friendships. They mourned. They celebrated. They experienced disappointment. They experienced grief. They experienced longing. The difference was never in what they felt. The difference was in what they allowed those feelings to become. Emotion was welcomed. Slavery to emotion was not. This distinction is essential because many people believe they are suffering because they loved too much. In reality, they are often suffering because they attached their identity to something they could never own. There is an important difference between saying, "This person brought great joy into my life," and saying, "My life cannot have joy unless this person remains." The first is gratitude. The second is dependence. Gratitude enriches the soul. Dependence quietly imprisons it. Think carefully about the moments in your own life when you have felt the greatest anxiety inside a relationship. Was it during the moments when love flowed naturally? Or was it during the moments when fear began asking endless questions? What if they leave? What if they stop loving me? What if someone better appears? What if I lose everything? Notice something remarkable. None of those questions describe reality. They describe imagined futures. Yet those imagined futures often create suffering just as intense as if they had already happened. This is one of the reasons Seneca wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Take a moment to truly absorb those words. They were written nearly 2,000 years ago, long before smartphones, long before social media, long before instant communication, and yet they describe modern life with astonishing precision. Today, a person may look at a phone 20 times within a single hour, hoping for a message that never comes. Each time they unlock the screen, they ask themselves the same silent question. Has anything changed? Usually nothing has, but something else has happened. Their peace has become increasingly dependent upon information they cannot control. The phone itself is not the problem. The message is not the problem. The problem is that their emotional stability has quietly been handed over to circumstances outside their authority. This is how inner freedom disappears, not all at once, but little by little. One expectation at a time, one fear at a time, one imagined conversation at a time. The Stoics noticed that the human mind possesses an extraordinary ability. It can create prisons without walls. A man may sit alone in a peaceful room while his thoughts carry him through arguments that never happened. He replays old conversations. He imagines future confrontations. He invents explanations. He rehearses apologies. Hours pass. Nothing outside has changed. Yet inside, an entire war has taken place. Now imagine another person sitting in that same room. They have experienced the same loss, the same disappointment, the same unanswered questions. But instead of allowing every thought to become a command, they simply observe. They notice sadness. They notice longing. They notice uncertainty. But they do not immediately believe every story their mind begins telling them. This is where Stoic discipline truly begins, not by controlling emotions, but by examining impressions before accepting them as truth. Epictetus taught that when an impression first arrives, we should not rush to declare it true. Instead, we should pause. That pause may be one of the most powerful moments available to any human being, because within that pause lives freedom. Imagine receiving a message that simply says, "We need to talk." Immediately your mind begins working. Perhaps something terrible has happened. Perhaps they are leaving. Perhaps they are disappointed. Perhaps they have found someone else. Within seconds, your imagination has already written an entire story, but none of it is reality. Reality consists of only 4 words. We need to talk. Everything else is interpretation. How much of your life has been shaped by interpretations rather than facts? It is a difficult question, yet an honest answer to it has the power to transform the way you live. The Stoics trained themselves to separate events from judgments. An event happens, a judgment follows. Most people experience both so quickly that they believe they are the same thing, but they are not. Someone leaves. That is the event. My life is over. That is the judgment. Someone rejects you. That is the event. I am unworthy of love. That is the judgment. Someone changes. That is the event. I will never be happy again. That is the judgment. The event belongs to reality. The judgment belongs to you. And if the judgment belongs to you, then it can also be examined. It can be challenged. It can be replaced with something truer. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that the mind has the power to color every experience. If you stain every event with fear, then life appears frightening. If you stain every disappointment with hopelessness, then life appears hopeless. But if you train your mind to look carefully before reaching conclusions, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop reacting. You begin responding. There is an enormous difference. Reaction is immediate. Response is thoughtful. Reaction belongs to impulse. Response belongs to character. Reaction asks, how do I escape this pain? Response asks, what kind of person do I wish to become through this experience? The Stoics always chose the second question because they understood something many people never discover. Every hardship is shaping someone. The only uncertainty is who that someone will become. Will suffering make you smaller, or will it make you wiser? Will rejection make you desperate, or will it teach you self-respect? Will loss leave you empty, or will it reveal strengths you never knew existed? Life asks these questions repeatedly. Very few people answer them consciously. If these reflections are helping you see your own experiences from a different perspective, I invite you to become part of this growing community. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring timeless wisdom together. If this lesson has brought someone to your mind, a friend, a brother, a parent, or anyone carrying the weight of loss, share this video with them. Sometimes a single idea, heard at the right moment, becomes the beginning of someone's healing. And I would genuinely like to hear from you. In the comments, tell us this. What has been the hardest lesson that letting go has ever taught you? Your words may become encouragement for someone reading them tonight. Now let me ask you another question. Not about the person who left, about you. Who were you before fear entered the relationship? Can you remember? Can you remember the version of yourself that laughed without constantly checking for reassurance? The version that pursued dreams with enthusiasm instead of waiting for someone's approval? The version that believed life itself was an adventure rather than a test you might fail? That person still exists. They have not disappeared. They have only been buried beneath layers of worry, attachment, and self-doubt. The Stoic path is not about becoming someone new. It is about removing everything that prevents you from becoming who you were always capable of being. And sometimes, the person who leaves your life becomes the unexpected teacher who begins that transformation, not because they intended to teach you, but because life often hides its greatest lessons inside its deepest losses. There is an old story, often told in different forms throughout history, about a traveler who carried a heavy sack over his shoulder. Day after day, he walked the same road, growing more exhausted with every mile. His back ached, his legs weakened, his breathing became heavier. Eventually, another traveler crossed his path and asked a simple question. "What are you carrying?" The weary traveler answered, "Everything I cannot afford to lose." Curious, the stranger asked him to open the sack. Inside there was no gold, no food, no clothing. There were memories, old conversations, broken promises, unanswered questions, regrets, imagined futures, words he wished he had spoken, words he wished he had never heard. The stranger looked at him with compassion and quietly asked, "How many of these things can you still change?" The traveler searched through the sack for a long time. Finally, he lowered his head. "None of them." The stranger smiled gently. "Then why have you chosen to carry them every day?" This story has survived in many forms because it reveals something profoundly human. Most of us are not exhausted by today's burdens. We are exhausted by yesterday's. We wake up carrying conversations that ended months ago. We carry disappointments that belong to another season of our lives. We carry expectations that reality has already dissolved, and without realizing it, we begin every new day already tired. The Stoics understood that the weight of life is often increased not by events themselves, but by our refusal to put them down. Think about that for a moment. How much of your emotional energy is being consumed by something that no longer exists, except in memory? How many hours have been surrendered to replaying moments that cannot be rewritten? How often have you found yourself speaking to someone inside your imagination, while the real person is no longer even part of your daily life? The mind has an extraordinary talent. It believes that repetition creates resolution. It convinces us that if we think about something long enough, we will somehow solve it. But there are experiences that are not solved. Through endless thinking, they are healed through acceptance. This is one of the greatest differences between overthinking and reflection. Reflection moves you forward. Overthinking keeps you standing in the same place. Reflection asks, "What can I learn?" Overthinking asks, "What if I had?" Reflection produces wisdom. Overthinking produces exhaustion. This is why the Stoics encourage their students to examine their thoughts. but never to become prisoners of them. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every morning represented the beginning of a new opportunity to govern his own mind. Imagine the pressure he lived under. He was responsible for an empire. Wars surrounded him. Disease spread across the Roman world. Political betrayal was never far away. Every decision carried enormous consequences, and yet, when he wrote privately to himself, he rarely complained about circumstances. Instead, he returned again and again to the same question: what kind of person will I choose to be today? Notice what he did not ask. He did not ask, will today be easy? He did not ask, will everyone understand me? He did not ask, will people remain loyal? He understood that these questions depended on forces beyond his control. Instead, he focused on the only question capable of changing his life. What will my character look like when this day comes to an end? Imagine if, instead of beginning each morning wondering whether someone would text you, call you, forgive you, or come back to you, you began each morning asking a different question. How can I become a wiser human being today? Everything changes because your attention changes. Energy follows attention. If your attention constantly follows another person's choices, your energy will follow them as well. You begin living in emotional exile, waiting for someone else to decide whether you may finally experience peace. But when your attention returns to your own character, something remarkable begins to happen. You slowly reclaim your life, not in one dramatic moment, not through a single realization, but through hundreds of quiet decisions. One morning, you choose not to reread old messages. Another day, you choose not to invent stories about what they might be doing. Week later, you notice that several hours passed without thinking about them. Months later, you realize something almost unbelievable. You smiled, not because they came back, because you no longer needed them. Too many people fear this moment. Strangely enough, they believe that healing means they did not truly love. Nothing could be further from the truth. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is remembering without bleeding. There is a quiet dignity in reaching the point where memories no longer demand your suffering as proof of your love. You can still appreciate what someone meant to you. You can still be grateful for the chapter they shared with your life. You can even miss them from time to time without surrendering your future to the past. This is one of the most mature forms of love the Stoics could imagine. A love that does not become ownership, a love that does not become obsession, a love that leaves both people free. Freedom was never the enemy of love. Fear was. Fear whispers that if someone walks away, your value walks away with them. Fear whispers that being left behind means you were not enough. Fear whispers that someone else's decision defines your worth. But reason speaks differently. Reason says that another person's decision tells you something about their path. It does not determine yours. This distinction may sound small. In reality, it changes an entire life. If you measure your worth by who stays, you will spend your life negotiating for acceptance. If you measure your worth by your character, then no departure has the power to diminish you. Epictetus once suggested that when something precious enters your life, you should quietly remember that it has been entrusted to you, not permanently given to you. Many people misunderstand this teaching. They assume it encourages emotional distance. Natinos does not. It encourages gratitude. Imagine borrowing a beautiful book from a dear friend, knowing that one day you must return. It does not prevent you from enjoying every page. In fact, it makes you appreciate it even more. Life itself works this way. Every friendship, every relationship, every conversation, every embrace, every season, they are gifts, not guarantees. The moment we confuse gifts with guarantees, suffering quietly begins. If these reflections have brought you a sense of calm, take a moment to support this community by subscribing to the channel. Every week, we explore timeless wisdom that helps us navigate the challenges of modern life with greater clarity and inner strength. If someone you care about is struggling to let go of the past, consider sharing this video with them, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Tell us in the comments, what has life taught you about letting go that you wish you had understood years ago? Your experience may become the very lesson another person needs tonight. As we continue this journey together, I invite you to consider one final thought before moving forward. Perhaps the person you have been trying so desperately to hold on to was never the one you truly needed to stop losing. Perhaps the person you have been searching for all this time has always been yourself. If you have listened carefully until this point, you may have noticed something unusual about the Stoic path. It has never asked you to stop loving. It has never encouraged you to become emotionally distant. It has never suggested that strength comes from building walls around your heart. Instead, it invites you to cultivate something far more difficult, a heart that remains open without becoming dependent, generous without becoming desperate, and loving without surrendering its freedom. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of human life. The more desperately we try to keep someone close, the more we begin to lose ourselves, and the more firmly we stand within our own character, the less we need to convince anyone to remain. People often ask, how do I make someone value me? The Stoic would gently smile and respond with another question. Why have you placed your value in another person's hands? Spend a few moments reflecting on that. From childhood, many of us were taught, without anyone intending harm, that our worth depended upon acceptance. We were praised when we pleased others. We feared disappointing those we loved. We learned to seek approval long before we learned to seek wisdom. As adults, this pattern quietly follows us. We adjust our opinions to avoid rejection. We remain silent when we should speak. We apologize for things that require no apology. We tolerate disrespect because we fear loneliness more than we value dignity. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, we begin negotiating away pieces of ourselves, not because anyone forces us to, because we believe that acceptance must be earned. Stoics challenged this belief at its foundation. They believed that every human being possesses something infinitely more valuable than status, wealth, admiration, or even the affection of others. They believed that each person possesses character. Character cannot be borrowed. It cannot be purchased. It cannot be given to you by another person, nor can it be taken from you without your consent. Everything external may change. Your reputation may change. Your health may change. Your relationships may change. Your circumstances may change. But your commitment to virtue remains your own. This is why Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that the true measure of a life is not what happens to a person, but how that person responds to what happens. Consider two trees growing on the same hillside. Both endure the same wind. Both experience the same rain. Both survive the same winters. Yet one grows deep roots, while the other remains shallow. When the inevitable storm arrives, people often say that the wind destroyed the weaker tree. But the wind did not create its weakness. The storm merely revealed what had been hidden beneath the surface all along. Life works in much the same way. Loss does not create character. It reveals character. Rejection does not invent insecurity. It exposes insecurity that already existed. Adversity does not suddenly produce wisdom. It reveals whether wisdom has been patiently cultivated over time. This realization changes how we see hardship. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the Stoic asks, "What is this experience revealing about me?" Perhaps it is revealing fear, perhaps pride, perhaps attachment, perhaps loneliness, perhaps the need for approval. None of these discoveries should become reasons for shame. They are invitations, invitations to grow where growth is needed. Imagine entering a room filled with mirrors. Every mirror reflects a different angle of your face. Some reveal details you had never noticed before. You would not become angry at the mirror for showing you the truth. You would simply understand that it is revealing what was already there. Life functions as one enormous mirror. Relationships are mirrors. Success is a mirror. Failure is a mirror. Loss is a mirror. Even the people who disappoint us become mirrors, reflecting parts of ourselves that remained invisible until that moment. Sometimes we discover patience, sometimes resilience, sometimes courage, sometimes wounds that have been quietly shaping our decisions for years. This is why the Stoics believed that every difficult encounter contained an opportunity for self-knowledge, not because suffering is inherently good, but because suffering has a way of removing illusions. When life is comfortable, it is easy to believe we have mastered ourselves. Then one unexpected goodbye arrives, and suddenly we discover how fragile our peace truly was. This is not failure. It is awareness, and awareness is always the first step toward transformation. There is another mistake people often make after someone leaves. They begin measuring their progress by how often they think about that person. I thought about them today. I dreamed about them last night. I saw something that reminded me of them. Then they conclude that they have made no progress. But that is not how healing works. Healing is not measured by memory. Healing is measured by dependency. You may remember someone for the rest of your life. The question is no longer whether they appear in your thoughts. The question is whether they still govern your peace. There is an enormous difference. A scar remembers the wound, but it no longer bleeds. A wise heart remembers love, but it no longer begs for what has already passed. This is the kind of peace the Stoics pursued. Not the absence of memory, not the absence of emotion, the absence of inner slavery. Imagine meeting someone 20 years after they left your life. You recognize them immediately. You smile with genuine kindness. You wish them well. You even feel gratitude for everything that chapter taught you. But when they walk away again, your peace walks beside you. It does not leave with them. That is freedom. Not because you stopped caring, because you finally stopped depending. If these reflections are helping you look at your own life with greater clarity, I invite you to subscribe and continue this journey with us. Every lesson on this channel is designed to help you cultivate a stronger mind, a calmer heart, and a life guided by timeless wisdom rather than passing emotions. If this conversation has encouraged you, leave a like so more people searching for peace can discover it. And I would truly enjoy reading your thoughts. In the comments, answer this simple question: what is one attachment that life has taught you to release? Your answer may inspire someone who feels trapped by the very same struggle. As our conversation continues, we are approaching perhaps the most liberating lesson of all. The goal was never to convince someone else to stay. The goal was to become the kind of person who remains whole, whether others stay or leave. Because the strongest person is not the one who never experiences loss. The strongest person is the one who refuses to lose themselves in the process. And that is where the quiet strength of the Stoics begins to reveal its true beauty. Now let us imagine that many years have passed, not a few weeks, not a few months, many years. Imagine that an older version of yourself is sitting quietly on a wooden bench at sunrise. The morning air is cool, birds are beginning their songs. The world is waking up slowly, and for the first time in a very long while, there is no urgency inside your heart. No need to check your phone. No need to wonder who is thinking about you. No need to replay conversations that can no longer be changed. Only silence. The kind of silence that once frightened you. The kind of silence you tried to escape through constant distraction. The kind of silence that eventually became your greatest teacher. Now imagine that your younger self approaches and sits beside you. The version of you who was terrified of being abandoned. The version who believed life could not continue after one particular person walked away. The version who cried in secret, who questioned their worth, who searched endlessly for answers that never came. For a long moment, neither of you says anything because some conversations are too important to begin with words. Finally, your younger self asks the question that has lived inside countless hearts throughout history. Did we ever stop hurting? The older version of you smiles, not because the question is naive, but because it is deeply human. Then comes the answer, no. Your younger self looks down, disappointed. But before despair has time to grow, the older version continues. The pain did not disappear overnight. It changed. It became quieter. Then it became lighter. Eventually, it became wisdom. There is another long silence. Then the older version says something unexpected. The greatest surprise was not that I survived losing them. The greatest surprise was discovering the person I became after I stopped trying to chase what was never mine, to keep. This is perhaps the lesson the Stoics wanted every student to discover. Not that life becomes free from suffering, but that suffering, when guided by reason instead of fear, can become one of life's greatest teachers. There is an ancient image that appears again and again throughout Stoic thought. The image of fire. Fire consumes, fire transforms. Place dry wood into a fire, and it becomes warmth. Place raw clay into a kiln, and it becomes pottery. Place unrefined metal into intense heat, and it becomes stronger. The obstacle is not merely endured. It becomes part of the transformation. Marcus Aurelius expressed this beautifully when he wrote that the blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything thrown into it. Pause for a moment and allow those words to settle. The fire does not ask whether the wood is convenient. It does not complain about what is placed before it. It transforms whatever it receives. The Stoic mind seeks to become like that fire, not because it enjoys hardship, but because it refuses to waste hardship. Every disappointment becomes understanding. Every rejection becomes humility. Every delay becomes patience. Every ending becomes the beginning of a deeper knowledge of oneself. Consider your own life for a moment. There were experiences you once believed would destroy you. Perhaps you remember them clearly. A heartbreak, a betrayal, a failure, the loss of someone you loved. At the time you could not imagine life beyond that moment. Yet here you are, still breathing, still learning, still capable of hope. That realization alone should remind you of something extraordinary. You have survived 100% of your hardest days, not because they were easy, because there was always more strength inside you than you realized. The Stoics believed that human beings often underestimate themselves. We assume we need certainty before taking another step, but certainty rarely comes first. Courage comes first, then clarity follows. How many beautiful chapters of life are never written because people refuse to turn the page? They remain standing in front of a closed door, hoping it will reopen. Meanwhile, life quietly builds new doors behind them, doors they never even notice because they refuse to stop staring at the one that has already closed. One of the greatest acts of wisdom is learning where to place your attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Whatever receives your attention grows. If resentment receives it, resentment grows. If gratitude receives it, gratitude grows. If fear receives it, fear grows. If wisdom receives it, wisdom grows. Every morning, before the world begins asking for your attention, ask yourself a simple question. What deserves my mind today? Not who is thinking about me, not what have I lost, but what kind of life am I building? That question slowly changes everything, because life is not shaped by one extraordinary decision. It is shaped by thousands of ordinary ones. The decision to get out of bed even when your heart feels heavy, the decision to take care of your body, the decision to keep your promises, the decision to forgive without forgetting your worth, the decision to continue becoming a better human being, even when no one is watching. This is the quiet heroism of the Stoic. Not dramatic victories, daily victories, invisible victories, victories that no audience applauds, victories that slowly build an unshakable soul. Perhaps someone listening to these words tonight feels completely convinced that their story has already been written. They believe they have missed their chance, that life passed them by, that happiness belongs to other people. If that is you, allow me to tell you something the Stoics
Would almost certainly remind you the future has
never asked for your perfection. It has only asked for your presence. You do not need to become fearless before moving forward. You only need to stop allowing fear to make your decisions. Every meaningful life begins the same way. One step, then another, not because the entire path becomes visible, but because the traveler finally chooses movement over paralysis. If this journey has encouraged you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and become part of this community of people seeking wisdom, resilience, and inner peace. If these reflections have helped you see your own life differently, leave a like so that this conversation can reach others who may be silently carrying the same burdens. And I invite you to answer one final question in the comments. What part of your life are you finally ready to let go of? Sometimes, writing a single honest sentence becomes the first step toward genuine freedom. As our time together draws to a close, I would like to leave you with one final reflection. One day, perhaps many years from now, someone will ask you how you survived the hardest chapter of your life. They may expect you to tell them about extraordinary courage, about perfect discipline, about some secret philosophy. Perhaps you will simply smile and quietly answer, I stopped trying to control who would stay, and I finally began learning how to stay true to myself. That, more than anything else, is the beginning of real freedom, and perhaps it is also the beginning of a truly peaceful life. As our journey together comes to an end, I would like to invite you to do something that we rarely allow ourselves to do in the modern world. Do nothing. for just a few moments. Resist the temptation to reach for your phone. Resist the urge to fill the silence with distractions. Simply remain here with your thoughts, your breath, and these final reflections, because it is often in silence that wisdom finishes speaking. When we began this conversation, we met someone who was afraid of losing someone they loved, afraid that a goodbye would become the end of their happiness, afraid that another person's decision would determine the value of their own life. Perhaps that person was you. Perhaps it was someone you once were. Or perhaps it is someone you know and love. Wherever you find yourself today, I hope you have discovered something that the Stoics spent their lives trying to teach. Your peace was never meant to be borrowed from another human being. It was always meant to be built within you. This does not mean you should stop loving. Love with all your heart. Celebrate the people who walk beside you. Be present. Be generous. Be compassionate. Tell people that they matter. Forgive whenever wisdom allows. Laugh deeply. Create memories. Your heart. The Stoics never asked us to become distant from life. They asked us to stop becoming dependent upon what life could never promise forever. Everything changes. Seasons change. Cities change. Empires rise and fall. Children become adults. Parents grow old. Friendships evolve. Dreams transform. Even the person you are today is not the same person who began listening to this reflection. Life is movement, always, and perhaps suffering begins the moment we ask movement to become still. There is an old saying that reminds us that no one steps into the same river twice, not because the river has changed, but because the person has changed as well. Every experience leaves its mark upon us. Every conversation, every disappointment, every act of kindness, every farewell. The question has never been whether life will change you. It always will. The question is this: will life make you more fearful or more wise? Will disappointment make your heart smaller or more compassionate? Will loss make you bitter or more grateful for every future moment that love chooses to visit your life again? That choice has always belonged to you, long after circumstances have passed, long after people have come and gone, long after memories have softened. That choice remains. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that the quality of our life depends upon the quality of our thoughts. Notice that he did not say the quality of our circumstances, not our possessions, not our reputation, not the number of people who remain beside us. He pointed inward, toward the place where every meaningful transformation begins, toward the mind, toward character, toward virtue, toward the quiet strength that no external event can permanently take away. Imagine your life as a great journey across an endless landscape. Along the way, many travelers will walk beside you. Some will remain for years, others only for a few miles. Some will teach you through kindness, others through disappointment. Some will arrive exactly when you need them, others will leave precisely when their lesson has been completed. You do not need to resent those who continue walking a different road. You can simply thank them for the part of the journey they shared, then continue walking, because your destination was never another person. Your destination has always been the highest version of yourself. That is the path the Stoics devoted their lives to walking. Not the pursuit of comfort, not the pursuit of admiration, not the pursuit of perfect circumstances, but the pursuit of wisdom. And wisdom has a remarkable characteristic. The more you practice it, the quieter your fears become, the calmer your decisions become, the lighter your heart becomes. Perhaps tonight, after this video ends, Nothing outside your life will immediately change. The phone may remain silent. The person you miss may still be absent. The unanswered questions may still exist. Tomorrow morning may look very much like today. But if one thought has changed, if one belief has softened, if one burden has become a little lighter, then something profoundly important has already happened, because every transformed life begins with a transformed mind. If these reflections have brought even a small measure of peace into your heart, I invite you to continue this journey with us here on Legendary Stoics. Subscribe to the channel and become part of a community dedicated to timeless wisdom, inner strength, and the daily practice of living with reason, courage, and tranquility. If this conversation reminded you of someone who is silently carrying the weight of loss, share this video with them. You may never fully know how much one thoughtful gesture can change another person's day. And before you leave, I would truly appreciate hearing from you. In the comments, complete this sentence with complete honesty. Today, I choose to let go of. Those few words may become more than a comment. They may become a promise to yourself, and they may encourage someone else to begin making the same promise. As we part ways, remember this: if someone wants to leave, let them go. Not because they never mattered, not because your love was insignificant, not because your memories were meaningless. Let them go because your peace is too valuable to be chained to another person's decision. Let them go because love cannot survive inside a prison. Let them go because your dignity deserves to remain intact. Let them go because every ending creates the possibility of a beginning that you cannot yet see. Most importantly, let them go because there is someone who still deserves your attention, one who has been waiting patiently while you searched everywhere else for peace. That person, as you take care of your mind, protect your character, choose wisdom over impulse, choose gratitude over resentment, choose courage over fear, and every single morning, when life places another challenge before you, remember the lesson that has guided generations of Stoics for more than 2,000 years. You cannot always choose what happens, but you can always choose the person you become because of it. Walk forward with courage. Walk forward with patience. Walk forward with dignity. And no matter who stays or who leaves, never abandon yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until our paths meet again, may wisdom guide your mind, may virtue strengthen your character, and may peace always find a home within your soul.